Hello. Oh, what a great crowd, resilient in this rain and this cold. Hello, everybody, and good evening. I'm Delinda Collier, Dean of Graduate Studies at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I'm so very pleased to welcome our presenter tonight, interdisciplinary artist Li Mingwei. In addition to his extraordinary work, which we'll hear about shortly, we will also welcome Li Mingwei as this year's Bill and Stephanie SAIC Distinguished Visiting Professor, an appointment that has been a gift to generations of students. A former member of the school's Board of Governors and member emerita of our Board of Trustees, Stephanie and her husband Bill SAIC are unparalleled friends to SAIC, having established both the Bill and Stephanie SAIC Professor of Fashion, Body, and Garment, and the Bill and Stephanie SAIC Distinguished Visiting Professorship, which we celebrate tonight. Their generosity has helped enable the school to annually bring in an internationally renowned artist or designer to partner with SAIC faculty and teach our students, and this has happened every year since 2006. Their generosity, this extraordinary program has brought such luminaries such as Kathy Opie, Amanda Williams, Chris Ware, Raven Chacon, and many others to SAIC's classrooms and studios. This spring, students can engage further with Li Mingwei in the classroom. We are so grateful to Bill and Stephanie SAIC. So before we begin, just a few notes. Please silence your cell phones and note that video recording of the lecture is not permitted. Following the presentation, we'll have time for 3 or 4, we'll probably have more time, but we'll see when we get there, questions before we conclude at 7:30. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand and our staff will bring you a microphone. We ask that questions be brief so we can hear from as many of you as possible. Introducing Li Mingwei tonight is my dear friend and colleague Nora Taylor, Alsdorf Professor of South and Southeast Asian Art in the Department of Art History. Please welcome Nora to the podium.
Thank you, Delinda. Thank you, everyone, for being here. So 10 years ago, nearly to the day, on October 31st, 2015, I was invited to participate in Asia Contemporary Art Week's field meeting, Thinking Performance, in New York City, where I was fortunate to have witnessed our visiting artist, Li Mingwei, offer a gift to the public. I watched as a professional vocalist sang a segment of Franz Schubert's Lieder to an audience member seated in a chair facing the singer. The audience member, after being invited by the performer, had volunteered to receive the gift of song. After a few notes, I felt moved and tears started to well up. My mother had just passed away a few months earlier, and it seemed that the song was meant as a gift to me. This work, titled Sonic Blossom, is just one of Li Mingwei's many projects that conjure and invite empathy, healing, and generosity. Among the most frequently presented, the Mending Project, which was inspired by the artist's own mother, exemplifies his practice of sharing emotions and insight into the self with his audience. Visitors come with damaged items of clothing and chat with him while he repairs the fabric, like the Japanese tradition of kintsugi that makes visible the wound, the break, or the tear rather than conceal it or pretend it never happened. He sees the mending as one of celebrating the imperfection, as a gift. With his Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Textile Art from California College of the Arts, many of his works use thread that at times serves as a metaphor for connectivity and dialogue. Through sound, they also exude peace, prompt reflection on the human spirit, and in my view, exemplify the Buddhist idea of mindfulness. These Buddhist threads appear in such works as the Bodhi Tree Project, commissioned by the Queensland government in Australia, where the artist carried a sapling of the sacred Bodhi tree from Sri Lanka to Brisbane to commemorate the Buddha's teaching. More recently, he's been collaborating with dancers and performers with works such as Chaque souffle une danse, or Each Breath a Dance, and Guernica in Sand. With the former, he and performers created breath drawings consisting of placing droplets of sumi ink on alabaster stone after a meditation exercise and blowing on them to create forms, each distinct from the next. The Guernica work entailed inviting participants one at a time to walk barefoot onto a reproduction of Picasso's Guernica painting made of sand. The movement of the feet would disrupt the patterns of the painting, and at the end of the day, the drawing would be swept into a pile and remade the next day. Like Tibetan sand mandalas, these works call on viewers to contemplate impermanence, and in the case of the Guernica work, to reflect on violence that continues to plague our world. Considering the tumultuous times in which we currently live, I can't think of a more relevant and meaningful artist to inspire students and bring wisdom to the SAIC community. Please welcome Li Mingwei.
Thank you so much. So I was on the plane from Paris coming back to the States about 3 days ago. And my friend told me, am I worried about coming back? And I didn't say yes or no because I want to experience what is it to be back here. So yesterday when I was going to my dear friend Jill's house and passing by the lake and seeing people running and walking their dog, and just living their quotidian life and activity, I kind of told myself, it's going to be okay. I'm very happy to be back in Chicago. The last time I was here probably was about 15 years ago when I did a project at the Chicago Cultural Center. What I'm going to do for you now is to share 6 stories with you. The reason why I call my project stories is because each one of them has its own life. In a way, the beginning and the content of the story, and then it stays with us. One day they will disappear. The first project I would like to share with you is called Money for Art. This is one of my very first performative participatory work I did when I was a textile student at CCAC, California College of Arts and Crafts. When I was looking into applying for graduate school, I did a lot of weaving. So my professor looked at these textiles and say they look great and they're absolutely fantastic. However, you're not going to get into any of the program you're looking into because these MFA programs are highly conceptual. Actually, the Art Institute is one of them. So she said, please spend a whole year just to do 3 activities. She didn't say project, she said activities for yourself. And at the end of 1 year, if you think they are good enough and you want to share with other people, then you can use them for application. Money for Art is one of those projects. I went to a cafe in San Francisco, took out a $10 bill, used about 45 minutes to make a sculpture out of this $10 bill. At the end of the day, I had 9 willing participants who were interested to find out what is this all about. So when I was making this, I would invite them to sit down in front of me, watching the transformation of this $10 bill into a sculpture. At the end of the 45 minutes, I would say, would you like to have this piece of artwork? All of them say yes. But what they needed to do for me is to give me their phone number so I can call them back every 6 months, for a whole year. This is what happened after 6 months. So someone was a little bit embarrassed to tell me that she used it for buying the, for $10 these days you can't really buy that, right? Or even a moccasin. So 12 months later, this gentleman here says stolen. I think he was a little bit embarrassed to tell me that he used it for something else. But my project is not about what's wrong or right. It's more about what happened at that moment of this transformation. The most interesting person is the homeless person here. I was a little bit hesitant to ask this gentleman to be a part of the project that deals with money. However, my professor told me, why don't you just go up and ask him if he wants to be a part of it? So John, being a Vietnam vet, he said, yes, I would love to be a part of this process. So after 12 months, he still has it. Whenever I go back to Berkeley and San Francisco, I would go visit him for the past, probably it went on for about 10 years, and then later on he found a job. So he is no longer homeless. However, when I see him, I will make a fresh $10 bill for him. The reason is because he usually collapses this $10 bill, put it in his wallet, and whenever his friends come to visit him, he will open it up and say, look, I have a piece of artwork. So at the end, he probably has about 12 or 13 of these very mushed up sculpture in his wallet that he carries around. So that whole process really became the seed of my practice, one of the seed, which is about giving the question to the participant, and each one of them will find their answer according to their own timing. So at the gallery, what I did is that instead of $10 bills, I used $1 just because it would be a very expensive project. I folded 36 different forms, asking people to exchange that is something of the equivalent value. So again, that is up to you to decide what is equivalent. Just to show you some of these objects that people left there. I think this was a bottle of empty Prozac, so someone had there. And this lady here, she gave me the code of her card. The next day she came in and she said, I noticed that you didn't take money out of it, even I gave you the card code. So I said, well, this project is about trust for me, so I'm not here to take advantage of my participant. In fact, it's a way of honoring you, that you trusted me with these things. So again, that became a seed of my later practice, which is how do we trust strangers, and how do we allow a stranger to be a part of our life in terms of interaction? The second story is called the Mending Project. It's a very easy and easily understandable project. So every day, myself here, or a volunteer from the community would be sitting there with needle and thread, waiting for just about anyone who comes to the gallery and wanted to have a piece of their clothing repaired or embellished. Okay, very simple. The project came from a very dark seed. You all probably know what this image is about, right? So 9/11/2000, my husband John was working in the building when the airplane hit. My father called me from Taiwan and said, you gotta run, the buildings are falling. And I didn't know what was happening, so he told me the airplane just flew into the World Trade Center, and is John there? And I say, yes, because we partied at the swimming pool that morning, and he went to work. So I went back to our house, took out everything that needed to be repaired, but I didn't have the time to repair, and just start repairing things until I heard the key went into the lock and it opened. He was standing there covered in ash and blood with 6 strangers behind him. So we kept these because people were running toward the building or away from the building, and John collected them. These are all people from outside of New York. As you all probably remember, New York was shut down for quite a long time. So it took me 9 years to have the courage to come up with a project about repair. We lost 400 of our best friends at that very moment of impact. And when you come to see this work or experience this work, what I just shared with you is not on the wall, mainly because I feel this kind of emotion should just be transmitted orally, but not through text on the wall. So when you arrive at this place, I will be there to repair. Just to show you some, I'm actually not a very good mender, so that's the way I did it here. And also like that. In a way, it is a celebration of what was broken and make it much more colorful and realize that this piece of clothing has a history, and that's the beauty of this piece of garment. In many ways, it's very similar to each one of us, that we are not perfect, and we all have these memories and experiences that made us, it gave us painful experiences. However, that makes us quite beautiful and individual. That makes us who we are. Another unfortunate mending here. Each of the garment is attached to the thread from the wall. So these people all are participating in a process or a journey together without knowing each other. So when this project was at Mori Art Museum, my mom came visit, and that was one of the most intimate conversations I ever had with my mom. She brought something that she made for me when I was quite young and had me repair. And I remember the hole. It's because I was running from a dog that was chasing me. And she kept it. And you'll see that image of me wearing that cloth later on in this presentation. So keep that in mind. Okay. Guernica in sand. This is probably one of the most famous paintings from the Western world. Picasso did this in 1937. It was his very immediate response of the bombing of Guernica. So, in fact, this has a little bit to do with Chicago. So when I was invited to do a project at the Yates Gallery at the Chicago Cultural Center, it was the largest space so far at that time that I have ever seen in terms of showing my work. So I thought, I'm going to do a large piece, a large scale of work. But as you saw for the first two projects, they are all quite intimate. That same time, when I was thinking about what to do, John and I took a long trip to Bolivia. We were caught in a highland desert storm. Our Jeep was being buried into the sand, and fortunately the storm stopped. So right before it covered us up. When I got out, I suddenly realized the work I wanted to do is Guernica, using that or paying homage to what Picasso did, and maybe to talk about or address the idea of impermanence. Could there be something come after something that was so horrific? Could there be beauty after horrific events? So this project was presented at Gropius Bau in Berlin, and the Gropius Bau building. And if you know about this building, this is actually quite a political statement at that time. This building in the Cold War was really the gate to the east and the gate to the west. So one of the gate opens to the east, one of the gate opens to the west. To do this project and where this thing happens has a lot of meaning. And the German headquarters was literally 30 meters away from the site. So the signal of bombing Guernica in 1937 was given just a few feet away from this site. How does this work? So we spent literally about a whole month, 12 people working morning to evening, and 28 tons of sand to create the sand painting. I want to point out, when the show opens, it's like this, right? However, over here, you could see there is a small portion here that's unfinished. We left buckets and seats over there just so it's a signifier that something is going to happen there in the future. So you come to see this work undisturbed for 3 months, actually, when it was at Gropius Bau. So one day, we have put it on the note that the performance is going to begin on this date. At 12 o'clock noon, I walked down to the sand painting, started walking toward this part to finish that part of the sand painting. Once I started finishing that part, that is the time that one person from the audience is invited to start walking onto the sand painting. You could just imagine the tension between the person who is walking and the person who's working on the Guernica sand painting. Gradually, one at a time, the work started to be transformed. Most of the people say destroyed, but it really depends on who you are and what angle and what is the frame of mind you're doing when you're on the sand painting. This is about 3 hours later. Still relatively clear that it is Guernica. Around 5:30, that was the sunset time, myself and 3 other colleagues went down to the sand painting. Each one of us took a corner and started brushing the sand into the middle. So you still could see it was Guernica. But it's a completely different picture now. This was at the sunset, and 6 hours before, it was like that. When I was doing this toward the end of the process of the finishing up the brushing, I noticed that people, when they first walk on it, the first hour, they were very careful. And then gradually they became meaner and meaner. And toward the end, people would just purposely jab the eye of the mother who was holding the baby because no one stepped on it. So they just went and just, I remember when this was at Dion last year, I got so angry at the person who was jabbing the dead child's eyes, and I actually had to get up and start staring at her. But I told myself, I just calm down, just get back to your knees and start preparing, getting things done. So it's a dilemma whenever I do this work. It's quite a overwhelming process for me. Okay. So from Berlin, let's go to Myanmar. Okay. I visited Myanmar in 2014. What I noticed was that there's this little hut just a few hundred meters away from each of the temple. There is usually a path between the hut where people take their shoes off and the temple. The path is always impeccably clean. There's always someone cleaning the path. I would ask the people who's cleaning the path, are you a volunteer or are you being paid? All of them say that they are volunteers, and it's a gesture of gift to themselves, to the people who comes to the pilgrims, and also to the Buddha. So I thought that was such a beautiful and generous gesture, and I would like to bring that back to my practice and to a museum setting. So when I was invited to take over the turbine hall at Tate Modern, I was quite hesitant what to do in there because, as you know, Turbine Hall was a turbine hall, and it was a place full of male energy. It's almost like you still could feel the heat that it generated for decades. Also physically, the material they use for building the contemporary turbine hall is glass, steel, cement, metal. Everything is so angular. My first intuition is I need to conquer the space, yeah? Like most of the artists, when they got invited to do a project at Turbine Hall, they create incredibly large and powerful work that addresses the site and the issue. So what I did is I thought, okay, I'm gonna create shape to address the site. What I did is I put white robes around and got up to the second floor and see this is where I'm gonna cut and create that shape. And you see why that shape, why I do this. But quickly I realized the jagged edge, although it's quite powerful, but it's fighting against the yang energy. I told myself it should be about harmony, about balance. So I thought about the idea of yin and yang. So maybe what I need to do is to create the other type of energy, which is the yin energy. So therefore I create a shape that is much more subtle and heavy and quiet. And I somehow feel like it has more of a female energy. It feels like a stone. It feels like a mountain. Every day for 6 weeks, one dancer starts brushing a pile of rice, uncooked rice, yeah, not cooked. And then the next dancer comes in and starts dancing or brushing the rice with this partner. They don't speak to each other, but then they do it very, very slowly and in silence. The only thing you can hear is the brushing of the rice and the ankle bell. Okay. So since this is a performative piece, I think it will make more sense or poetic sense to show you a very short video. It's about 4.5 minutes that Tate did it for this project. So here we go. The idea of our labyrinth came when my partner and I went to Myanmar the end of 2014. I constantly see this very clean path in front of any temple. Volunteers would be cleaning 24 hours. it's a gesture to clean the path itself, but also to clean their internal world. I thought it would be really beautiful to bring that spirit into a performative piece. It's about how these two dancers negotiate, collaborate, and create a sense of unity. On the other hand, there's also individuality. In all of my work, the idea of tension is very important. What is tension for me? The tension is that unknown element that makes this work open to all different kinds of possibilities. It's not a choreographed piece. The only thing I tell the dancer, you need to move very slowly, listen to the rise, listen to yourself, and also be aware of your partner. I grew up in Taiwan until 12. I trained as a classical violinist and studied textile and architecture. In a way, I'm still a textile artist because I'm creating a social weft and warp to create a connection between stranger and society. Our labyrinth is purely a performative piece. Whereas my other work, for example, Sonic Blossom, I work with opera singers and they encounter someone just randomly and say, "May I give you a gift of song?" I always think that as an artist, I'm really in the care of the strangers who makes the work much more poetic than I can ever imagine. When I open up to other people, these magical encounters become the complexity and the beauty of the work. When I create a costume, I want to create a costume that's easy for the dancers to dance. The bell is particularly important because it creates a very delicate and refined sound, and that heightens the movement. Rise for me, being partly Aboriginal Taiwanese, is very sacred. So the dance that the dancers are creating is really a celebration of life. They're allowing you to enter their very intimate world, and that is an incredible, precious jewel because the pattern that you see, it's at that very moment a reflection of their interior world, and the pattern really acts like a mirror. When it reaches a balance, that is where the perfect yin and yang exists. When you see or experience my works, it's not about particular culture. It's really about what is it to be a human being. The last two stories, Bodhi Tree Project. Okay. So most of us probably know who this person is the historical Buddha, who was a prince back about 2,500 years ago, and then he went through different voyages, sitting underneath a Bodhi tree, enlightened and became one of the greatest teachers. So what does it have to do with me? In 2004, in Brisbane, Australia, they were thinking about building a museum of modern and contemporary art. So the director asked me to create a work that is both permanent and also a living artwork. So that's quite a challenge. What I did was that I thought I wanted to find out if it's a possibility that I could get the sapling from the original Bodhi tree and bring that sapling to plant in front of the Museum of Modern Art as an artwork and as a living tree. Okay, sounds very simple. So when I told this to the director, she happens to be from Sri Lanka. And she said, Mingwei, that sounds very, very difficult, but we'll get it done. Give me a few years to do this. What we did, so just to give you a little history, when Buddha was enlightened 2,500 years ago, the king at that time started building these palaces and university around it. So one of the king was King Ashoka, and his daughter Sanghamita, Princess Sanghamita, was a Buddhist nun. So one day she heard of this destructive force coming into the city and into the palace, and their goal is to cut that tree down, where witness the enlightenment, that particular tree witnessed the enlightenment of Buddha. So she went into the palace, hid and took a sapling from that tree, hid in her robe, escaped to what we know as Sri Lanka now, to a town called Ananapura. So if you go to Sri Lanka now, go to Ananapura, there is that tree that came over thousands of years ago from northern India, which witnessed the enlightenment of this great teacher, Buddha. This is that tree, quite huge. This kind of Bodhi tree, well, this kind of banyan tree actually grow everywhere, and they're very sturdy. The villagers heard of this person coming to receive the sapling from this mother tree. They all sat around the mother tree 24/7 for a whole week, chanted this sacred hymn to the tree so it will give power and energy for this baby tree to go to another place. When I arrived there, so underneath the yellow parasol is they prepare the sapling for me to bring it back. And this was the sapling. When the high priest handed the sapling to me, instead of chanting in Pali, he spoke in English. He said, "You are a magnificent being, and you're going to venture to a beautiful island called Australia that no sacred trees has ever been to. So your task is to be a tree and grow as big and as huge and as big as you can, so you can create shades and protection for the sentient beings there." And that's all he said. And in that moment, when he handed it to me, I almost dropped it just because emotionally, historically, it's so heavy. And at that moment, I didn't even know if I have the power to bring this sapling back to Australia. So silly me, I didn't do a research. When I took the sapling, I was stopped at the Qantas gate because I didn't have the right paper to import exotic plants into Australia. So I had to use DHL. So if any of you want to send exotic plants to Australia, DHL is a good one. When it arrived in Australia, she had to, I always think of as a female energy, she had to stay in the quarantine for 6 months. It just happened to be that the custom officer who was taking care of this, as you can see, there are other plants back there, right? Oh, sorry, other plants back there. And she actually came from Sri Lanka, and her house was just a mile away from the temple. Therefore, she knows exactly the duty, the sacred duty she has is to protect this sacred creature, this Bodhi tree. Later on, I had a conversation with her, and she told me that with her belief, she believes that it was many, many, many incarnations of good deeds and good life she did. Therefore, she had the privilege of taking care of this sacred tree. It just happened that there is a group of Taiwanese nuns who has a temple in Brisbane. It belongs to the Buddha Light Mountain, Bo Guangshan. So the nuns came over to the museum literally before we planted this tree and basically asked the curator, say, if there's anything we could be of help, we're more than happy. But they didn't know there is such thing as this project. So it was quite a uncanny coincidence, right? So immediately we asked the nun if they can come and do a blessing when we planted this tree. So they did, and they continue to do that every year on Buddha's birthday. Someone took a picture and sent it to me. As you can see, a father and a child is taking a little nap there. This is about 3 years later. She really took on the task of becoming a sacred, huge tree. So the nuns have been so wonderful and came during Buddha's birthday, did 3 hours of chanting. So it's imbued in sacred energy. And what the curator told me, which was very moving, that it's not only the Buddhist practitioners who come to the sacred tree. The other spiritual practitioners, even the indigenous one, will come and do their own ritual and celebration according to their own practice. So this really is not just a tree for the Buddhists, but also the tree for the people who have certain belief and bring their own belief to the tree. The other day, yearly, I will receive very interesting two documents. One is from the conservation department because it's in their permanent collection, right? The other one is the tree doctor report of the tree. So it always comes to me on Buddha's birthday as a reminder and a gift. The last story, Sonic Blossom. So remember the little jacket I was telling you that my mom brought me to repair? So this was the jacket. And mom was holding my little hand. I didn't look very happy because that was my very first day of kindergarten. I didn't want to go. Mom, being a very clever person, she spent 6 months to make everything I was wearing at that day and said, if you ever miss mom, just think of mom is hugging you because you're wearing something I made for you. When she was quite ill about 15 years ago with a heart disease, I went back and took care of her. While we were in ICU, I played Schubert's Lieder for her. The reason is because she did the same thing for me when I was young. I was quite a rambunctious little child, and hot summer nights in Taiwan is quite unbearable, and let alone having a child, 4-year-old, running around screaming. So mom would play Schubert's Lieder in a very soft volume. I always say, Mom, I couldn't hear Schubert singing. Of course, it wasn't Schubert singing, but to me it was like Schubert singing. And she said, my dear child, you just need to sit down and be very quiet and you'll hear the music. So I played the same music for her, and I just thought it's the most beautiful and intimate time that I share with my mom. And later on, when she came with the mending project, that was another one of those moments. So when for the inauguration of the National Museum of Modern Contemporary Art in Seoul, they commissioned this work. So when you came to the museum, it's a very simple situation, a chair and a stand there. I designed the costume for the opera singer to wear. It's a reminiscent of a black tulip. because a black tulip for me is a demigod. It's someone or something that is bigger than life. The singer will wear this costume, walking very majestically and slowly through the gallery to make her encounter by asking someone of her choice, "May I give you a gift of song?" This young man said, "Yes, that would be lovely." Sat down, and she would sing one of the 5 Schubert lieder I asked him to learn as a gift. The whole process lasts about 3.5 minutes. People are so sensitive to sound, especially in the museum. They will run toward where this is coming from, and then witnessing the exchange, the extremely delicate, powerful, and intimate exchange between these 2 strangers. After 3.5 minutes, the singer bows, turn around, continue to her next voyage in search of the encounter that is waiting for her. And in a few minutes, it's as nothing happened there. When it was at MFA Boston, I created a very different costume, mainly because it was the situation was set in the European room or gallery. So the singer Bebe found this young girl in the Rembrandt room, brought her back. Later on, I asked Bebe, "What were you doing for her?" She said she noticed that her shoelace was off, so she bent down and finished tying it for her, because every gesture she is doing for this young girl is a gift for her. So after this, Baby actually had a very beautiful experience, just because this little girl followed her all the time for about three hours, and we couldn't find her mother, until we announced it, like, "Hi, we have a young girl here. Please come fetch her." So what I'm going to do for you is, may I ask you to close your eyes for about 3.5 minutes? What I'll do is I'll play a Schubert lied for you, imagining that someone just came up to you and say, "May I give you a gift of song?" And here we go.
Lieber Mond, geist eine Silberflimmer durch dieses Buchengrün, wo Fantasien und Traumgestalten immer vor mir vorüberfliehen. Enthülle dich, dass ich die Stätte finde, wo oft mein Mädchen saß und auf dem Wind des Buchbaums und der Linde der goldenen Stadt vergaß. Enthülle dich, dass ich des Strauchs mich freue, der Kühlung ihr gerauscht, und einen Kranz auf ihre Wange streue, wo sie den Bach belauscht. Dann, lieber Mond, durch den Wolken floh, hernieder wie dein verlassener weint.
Okay, you can open your eyes now. That was by Ian Bostridge, one of my favorite singers. Thank you so much for your patience, and we'll open up for a Q&A. Thank you.
We have time for a few questions. Please raise your hand and we'll get the microphone to you.
Hello, thank you so much for the talk and sharing your experience with us today. I am kind of curious about your, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I'm curious about the materials that you use throughout different, like in different work, like the rice and like the ankle bells and like things like that, and the materials that you use for the costumes or like clothings and so on. What are some of the approaches or like kind of thinking behind that? Because you mentioned that the rice is like connected to Taiwan, to your home country, and like things like your personal experience or like history. What are some of the other materials that you think, or like how you approach them to bring to your work, and in different places and different maybe different culture around the world? Yeah.
Great question, thank you. So I'll answer it sort of circuitously. I grew up in Taiwan until about 13, and then I moved to Dominican Republic, of all places, for 2 years, and then to San Francisco, and now lives in Paris, New York, and Taipei. So as you saw, almost all of these works are from my memories, often childhood memories, yeah? And the way maybe the better way of answering your beautiful question is that these works, I don't go look for them. They came to me. And I was telling my dear friend yesterday that these works, I believe they live in a mystical mountain. And one day they decide to come down and look for someone who can realize them. And it just happened to be, I was just standing there, whatever, and realize them. So the elements that you mentioned, for example, the fabric that I use, or the rice, or the ankle bell, these are things that I didn't realize I'm going to use them until the idea came. And then it's almost like building a Lego, that when you have an idea, you start putting things in, and then there are things that comes off eventually. I know my friends told me that often when I have an idea, when I share with them, it's quite large, conceptually and complex. When it's being presented, let's say a year or two later, it really became quite distilled to a point that only the essence of what I talked about were included in the work, but not all the superficial thing, it just fell apart. So so these things that you mentioned did come to me, and I consider if I'm going to use them or not. Yeah, it does have to do with where I come from, actually. Yes. Okay. Who has the camera? Not camera, the microphone. Okay.
Hi. So in your investigation into humanity, what has surprised you the most about your sort of quest into thinking about it seems like you're thinking a lot about kindness and goodness and just like humanity in general. What surprised you the most about humankind?
What surprised me the most is that we are all very similar. Although we look quite different, it doesn't matter where we came from in many ways. I was just in Sweden to open a show at the Musée Moderne in Malmö. I was there for several site visits and then was there for 3 weeks to install the work. And my experience of the Swedish, they're quite austere and reserved with their emotion. So when my show opened, in the middle of the vernissage, I heard the director talk to the guards by saying, "Can you please bring Kleenex?" Because there were all those people crying and sobbing next to my work. And I was so surprised. And I thought people will experience my work differently because of the culture, because of the country. No, actually they experience very similarly, especially, for example, Sonic Blossom. At first I thought, would people understand the text and therefore be moved? In fact, it's almost exactly the same response if it was in Tokyo, Taipei, Beijing versus Berlin or Munich. It's exactly the same. And one of the journalist was talking to me, and she said, with all your work, she found her dignity in an undignified time. And I thought that was actually a very moving way of experiencing my work. Yeah. Okay, I'll just go. Yes, you've been raising your hand 3 times. Yes. What is your question? I'll repeat it.
We'll get the microphone to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing the 6 beautiful stories for us. It's very inspiring. And my question is mainly about the mending project. I was wondering, when you repairing those clothes with the audience, would you talk to each other, sharing your own experiences? And if their experiences so emotionally, so intense, how did you deal with that? And sorry, one more question is about, because this distance, I can see the stitches on your clothes. Would you mind to share with that?
Oh, okay.
The stitches over here.
Yes, okay. This is actually an easier question. So this fabric, again, it has a personal history. My grandparents were educated in Japan in 1930s, and they see themselves as Japanese. So they were wearing kimonos at the time. They bought all these hand-woven bolts of silk for bringing it back to Taiwan to make kimono. When Japan lost the war and they didn't wear kimono anymore, so I inherited about 150 bolts of these beautiful hand-woven silk, and this is one of them. So the pattern that you see, these are all embroidered, hand embroidered from someone back in the 30s. These beautiful silk fabric. Okay, so your first question is about mending project, right? When the mender and mendee sat together, often we have extremely intimate conversation. Maybe because usually either you do your own mending or someone intimate would do it for you, like your mother, your sister, or someone, right? But now a stranger doing it, it's quite an intimate experience. They're touching your second skin. They're repairing it. So I remember in Venice Biennale, when I did this work, 2017, one of the most memorable, lacking of a better word, experiences that this young woman came, this was hot summer, August. She came with this blue coat and with a big tear on it. So I started repairing, and I noticed that she looked physically quite different, and she was speaking German with the lady who was sort of next to her. So she had brown skin like me, and bright blue eyes, and dark hair. And she looked almost South Asian. So I say, tell me about your background. And she said, I was born in the Amazonian forest. My people because of my blue eyes and my relatively fair skin, they think I was sent by the devil. So they flow me down. It's like Moses. They flow me down the river. And my mother here, the German couple, caught the basket with me in there. So they adopted her, right? And I said, so what about this coat? And she said, this is a coat that my mom bought me for on my 20th birthday. And my father was there, but my father is not here anymore. And I wish it was my father who's doing the mending for me. And after she said that, she just ran the other way and didn't even come back to get her coat until later that day. So these are very powerful stories that people somehow are so generous and open to share with a stranger. And maybe because I think with all the works that you heard today, in many ways, although physically they look quite different, but internally, in essence, these are all mirrors. They mirror who you are, the people who come to encounter them. So it reflects back. Yeah.
Audrey?
Yes, please. Sorry, I'm just taking over this.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about, within your work, there's lots of, I think, immaterializing love and grief and memory and healing. I want to ask about how you think regarding the duration of your work, specifically, I think the remnants of something that's immaterial, like a performance or like a shared activity is very intimate, how you think about the duration of those in terms of the people who participated in them with you.
Okay, very good. Recently, I just had a very interesting experience with Tate Modern because they were talking about acquiring that piece. So what did they acquire? Rice and ankle bell and brooms and the sarong? But that's really not the work, right? As you all know. The essence of the work is not there. So for a whole year and a half, I worked with the conservation department, the curatorial department, and public programming department, curatorial, to figure out what is it that the legacy of that work, and what is that they are going to collect. So it's a fascinating conversation, and I think I always start by saying to institutions that, when you acquire work like this, you are acquiring an exotic living organism. For example, that work is called Our Labyrinth. So MFA Boston acquired Sonic Blossom. And what is it that acquired? And so the curator and the acquisition team also had a very similar question, like, what are we buying? So I decided to go in there and by saying, this is what you're buying, an exotic plant that's called Sonic Blossom. Every 5 to 7 years, this flower has to open and blossom. So all the bees and butterflies, meaning people and singer, can get the nourishment from this plant and vice versa. After 21 days or a whole month of blooming, it will go into a dormant state and it will remain silent until the next time. So that's a poetic way of talking about that work, but in reality, we're talking about institutional memory. How do you do this work? So when a curator does that every 5 to 10 years, then they know what to do instead of, oh, we don't know what to do, and therefore we don't want to do it anymore. So there are components in my work that has physical component, and yet it's much bigger than that. Yeah, thank you.
Audrey?
Thank you for sharing those stories. I think a common theme I'm getting is intimacy, trust. How do you see that? I think you touch upon its shared experience between different countries, cultures. Given the duration, how do you think these changes from time to time, meaning like 10 years ago, 20 years ago to now? And then like you mentioned, to following 5-7 years every time they exhibit?
Since my practice, which started 1997, almost 30 years, from my observation, the interaction has not changed because we're all human and we all know how to receive gifts and give gifts. And even across the globe, it really doesn't matter where the project is happening. It's very similar, very, very similar. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Jayan.
I think I got the mic here. Yes.
Oh, could you stand up so I can see where the voice is coming out from?
Yes, I'm sorry. I have my laptop on my lap. I cannot stand up. Sorry. Hi, my name is Helen, and I do have questions about the process in where you sublimate their personal experiences into art. And as a storyteller and a weaver, in my impression, when working with interactions, do you consider the physical visuals that might be placed in museum settings as a part of art? Or is it the visuals might be setting the conditions for the art to arise? And that might be the question.
So when you say the visual meaning, for example, for the Sonic Blossom, the visual meaning the chair and the costume, is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm thinking of the chairs, the costume, and also the composition of the settings.
Yes, these are hugely important because they are signifiers of who you are as an artist. And for example, I could choose an IKEA chair, right, or a Muji costume. But that really, I think that's a little bit too far. But but that really will give a completely different meaning to the work. So as an artist yourself, you really need to have a very good control of what you put out there, yeah? And I think it's good to find a balance because for me, I don't want people to walk away thinking, this artist spent so much time doing this, it's so heavy. It's not that, it's more about it makes poetic sense of who you are. It might not work for the other person. You know, the other person might say, okay, IKEA chair might work. But for me, it doesn't work. And therefore, I have to find my own solution, and I have to find my own language for that. Yeah, and it comes with practice. Yes. Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
May I ask a question in Mandarin first, and then maybe I could translate it myself, or maybe you can.
Sure. Ask in Mandarin, and I'll repeat it in English.
Thank you. Hi, 李老师你好，我叫吴玉欣。我很想要知道说，在你的作品里面，你想要改变世界吗？然后如果有的话，我想要知道。在你的想法里面，理想的世界的状态会是什么样的？
Okay.
谢谢你。
So she has, I never received this question before actually. She said, hello, Li Lao Shi, teacher Li. With your work, have you thought about changing the world? And if you do, what is the ideal situation or the ideal world? I never dare to think of that. I'm definitely not interested in that. And as an artist, I see it as a vocation, that it's my voice that I'm sharing with you, but no one has to agree with it. Yeah? I think sometimes maybe people give too much benefit of the doubt to an artist and too much responsibilities. And I'm definitely not courageous enough to take on that task. Okay, thank you. Okay, yes, you.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, yes.
I guess I have two questions that are about like the development of your practice. How did you come to find art as a practice, and how did you find like Buddhism and that integrating that practice into your art? We could see like the shift of it throughout your work, but how did you internally do it?
How I found my practice, art, how I became an artist, and then about Buddhist practice. I'll answer the second one first. So I was just talking to Alex this morning about this idea that often it's quite easy for people to pick me as an artist that has Buddhist aesthetic, just because the way I look and also some of the work do suggest that aesthetic. However, I do have to say, in all the great spiritual practice, they all have these elements that we discussed. So it's not just Buddhist, yeah? I also grew up going to Catholic school since kindergarten, all the way to college. Buddhism for me is something that you might find something in there, especially the Bodhi Tree Project. Yeah, it just happened to be like that. As an artist, I actually started as a biologist, and I didn't even know there was such a thing as an artist. Someone who could be an artist, because they're all dead. When I went to the National Palace Museum, these are all dead people, so they didn't exist. Anyway. And one day, so after I finished my degree in biology, I told my parents that I actually don't want to be in science. And they asked me, what do you want to be? I said, I wanted to be in a place that has no right or wrong answer. I want that sense of freedom. So, but at the time I still didn't know there is such thing as artists, so I say architecture. So I went into architecture, which was a mistake. Well, not really, because both biology, being a scientist, and also being an architect or architectural practice, it gives me the discipline I needed to do what I'm doing right now. So I'm very grateful of the training and exercise I went through, and then later on I found my footing in this place, so-called being an artist, and create something that I don't think I'm creating anything that is original, in a sense that I owe a lot to all the predecessors that came in front of me. Imagining if there wasn't Yoko Ono or Marina Abramovich or John Cage or all these great iconic artists, I would not be standing here talking to you, just because they were so brave enough to charge forward. And when museum institutions do not understand what they're doing, right? And now what I do is really quite mundane, and people understand what I do. Yeah, thank you.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Okay,
Jay.
yes.
Hello.
Hello.
I think that your art is beautiful in the way that it touches on, I'm right here.
Oh, hi.
Very
hi.
back.
Sorry.
I think it's beautiful in the way that it touches on the intimacy and vulnerability of human connection. And I wonder how your observations of this topic have altered the way you define success in artistic practice.
Repeat that again, sorry, I didn't really...
I wonder how your observations of humanity and human connection have altered the way that you define success in your own artistic practice.
Okay. I actually never thought of my work as either successful or not. I often observe the people who came upon my work, and their interaction with my work really gives me the energy and the source of continuing to do what I do. If one day, when I put my work out there and people just sort of walk by and it doesn't make any sense, I'm more than happy to not do anything. So I feel I owe a lot to the people who came upon this work, and I think my work could work like, for example, a glass of water. When you're so thirsty, that glass of water means billions and gazillion dollars. But when you're not hungry or thirsty, that glass of water doesn't mean anything. So as an artist, I feel that's how my work is. And I don't really create work because of audience. It's not that. It's not about creating something for someone. It's at the end of the day, it's about realizing these work that existed already, and it just through me that they came out. And one day they will disappear and go back to where they came from. Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question. Yeah. Thank you. Last question before the class is over. Hello, yes.
Oh, hi, Mr. Lee. So I want to ask you a question. So what do you think is the important factor for students for their first step into the performance art?
Oh, what about, can I change your question a little bit? What are the things for students to think about when they want to be an artist, not just a performance artist, yeah? I think one has to be very brave. And it's not an easy place to be an artist. And yet it's the most gratifying thing I could ever imagine, yeah? I also tell my students that I know once you graduate, you might have to face the reality of making a living, right? The real world hits. So yes, of course, we all have to do odd jobs to support what we do, but you have to be very careful to find a balance. You always need to have enough energy to be inspired after a day of hard job or odd jobs that you have. So when you come home, when you create, you have to have the energy very, very pure and very high, because otherwise, if your energy is low and tired and angry, the work will come out that way. And I'm not sure if that is what I want other people to see of my work. So if I have something to say to my students, I always say, be happy and take care of yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Mingwei. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you so much.